The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber slid open with a hiss that echoed through the vast hall. Commander James Miller stepped forward, his boots clicking against the polished floor. Behind him walked his crew of 12 humans, all wearing their best uniforms. They had traveled for 20 years through the darkness of space to reach this moment. James looked up at the hundreds of alien creatures sitting in curved rows above him. Some had scales that shimmered under the bright lights. Others had fur in colors he had never seen before. Many walked on 4 legs or 6 legs. Some floated in the air without any legs at all. A few looked like giant insects with massive eyes that watched his every move. None of them looked friendly. "The bipeds have arrived," announced a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. A creature descended from the highest platform. It had 8 long tentacles that moved like water, and its skin changed colors as it spoke. "I am Speaker Valden. I lead this council." James cleared his throat. His heart pounded in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. "Thank you for allowing us to come before you. I am Commander James Miller of Earth. We come in peace. We hope to join your council and learn from the wisdom of your great civilization." A strange sound filled the chamber. It took James a moment to realize that many of the aliens were laughing. The sound was not kind. "Bipeds," said a creature that looked like a massive lizard with 4 powerful legs. "How utterly primitive. Look at how they balance on just 2 limbs. It is almost sad to watch." "They must struggle just to walk without falling," added another voice. This came from a being with 6 legs like a horse, but with arms that ended in delicate claws. "How do they accomplish anything?" James felt his face grow hot, but he said nothing. Beside him, Emily Watson, his chief engineer, clenched her fists. He could feel the anger radiating from his crew, but they all held their positions. Speaker Volton's tentacles waved in the air. "The Council has studied your species for the past 3 months. We have reviewed your technology, your history, and your biology. We have reached a decision." James waited. Everything depended on this moment. Earth had sent them here with hopes of joining the greater galaxy. Humanity needed access to advanced technology, to new worlds, to resources that would help their growing population. "You will be granted citizenship in the Galactic Council," Valden continued. James felt a surge of relief and joy. They had done it. Humanity would join the stars. "However," Valden said, and James's happiness died in his chest, "you will be classified as Tier 7 citizens." "Tier 7? James asked. "What does that mean?" A screen appeared in the air showing 7 levels. James saw that Tier 1 held only 3 species. They seemed to rule the council. Tier 7 was at the bottom, crowded with dozens of species. All of them appeared to be bipeds like humans. "Tier 7 citizens perform necessary but simple work," explained a 4-legged creature with golden fur. "Maintenance, waste management, basic construction. It is all that bipeds are suited for, given your limited physical capabilities." "That is not acceptable," said Emily, stepping forward despite James's warning look. "We have crossed 300 light-years of space to get here. Our technology is adequate for your kind," Valden interrupted smoothly. "But it does not compare to what the higher tiers have developed. You must understand, biped anatomy is simply inefficient. It is not an insult. It is biology. Species with more limbs can accomplish more complex tasks. This has been proven over millions of years of evolution across thousands of worlds." James took a deep breath. He looked back at his crew. Some looked angry. Others looked crushed. They had all sacrificed so much to make this journey. Many had left families behind on Earth, families they would never see again because of the time dilation from their long voyage. "What if we refuse?" James asked quietly. The chamber fell silent. Volton's tentacles stopped moving for a moment. "Then you return to Earth. You remain isolated in your small corner of space, alone, with no access to Council resources, Council technology, or Council protection. There are dangers in the galaxy, Commander. The Council provides safety. Without us, humanity is vulnerable." James felt the weight of billions of people on his shoulders. If he walked away now, Earth would remain alone. Humanity would struggle for centuries to develop technology that the Council already possessed. But if he accepted, humans would be treated as inferior beings, given only the lowest jobs. He thought of his daughter back on Earth. She would be dead by now, aged while he traveled through space. But her children would still be alive. Her grandchildren. What future did he want for them? "How long must we remain in Tier 7? James asked. "Until you prove otherwise," Valden said. "Though I must be honest, Commander. Most biped species never advance. It is simply the nature of your physiology." James looked at Emily. She gave him a small nod. They both knew they had no real choice. "We accept," James said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "Excellent," Valden said, his tentacles waving in what might have been pleasure. "Welcome to the Galactic Council, humanity. May you serve well." As guards led them from the chamber, James heard the whispers and laughter following them. But he kept his head high and his back straight. They thought humans were weak because they walked on two legs. They thought humans could only perform simple work. They would learn differently. James would make sure of that. 6 months had passed since humanity accepted their place at the bottom of galactic society. Thomas Reed wiped black grease from his hands and stared at the impossible machine in front of him. The waste processing station on orbital platform 7 was a nightmare of twisted pipes and blinking panels that made no sense. "This is the third time this week," muttered Rebecca Hayes, crawling out from under a filtration unit. Her uniform was covered in oil and dirt. "The Hexalons designed this entire system for themselves. Everything requires 6 hands working at the same time." Thomas nodded and looked around the massive room. Dozens of Hexalon workers scurried around on their 6 insect-like legs. They looked like giant ants, each one trying to operate complex machines that needed all 6 of their limbs at once. But they kept making mistakes because the timing had to be perfect. "Watch this," Thomas said quietly. He pointed to a Hexalon struggling with a control panel. The creature had 1 limb on each of 6 different buttons, trying to press them all at exactly the right moment. It failed 3 times before finally getting it right. "We could do that with 2 people in half the time," Rebecca said. Thomas smiled. "Then let's prove it." For the next 3 nights, after his official work shift ended, Thomas stayed in the station. He studied every pipe, every wire, every control system. He made drawings and took notes. The other human workers thought he was crazy for working extra hours without pay, but Thomas had a plan. The main filtration system was the worst design he had ever seen. It required 6 Hexalons standing at 6 different control panels, all pressing buttons at the exact same moment. If even one of them was half a second too slow, the whole system would shut down and need to be reset. Thomas redesigned it completely. 2 control panels. Simple steps that happened one after another instead of all at once. Any 2 workers could operate it, and it would actually work better than the original design. He submitted his design to his supervisor, a Hexalon named Krelix, who towered over Thomas on his 6 powerful legs. Krelix barely looked at the plans. "This is unacceptable. Biped designs are not suitable for council infrastructure. We have been building these systems for 1,000 years. You have been here for 6 months. Your proposal is rejected." Thomas felt anger burning in his chest, but he said nothing. He went back to work, cleaning waste pipes and doing the simple jobs that bipeds were allowed to do. Then 2 weeks later the alarm started screaming. Thomas was eating lunch in the cafeteria when the red lights began flashing. An automated voice spoke calmly but firmly. "Oxygen system failure. All personnel remain calm. Repair teams report immediately." The cafeteria erupted in panic. Platform 7 held 10,000 people from dozens of different species. Without oxygen they would all die. Thomas ran to the oxygen recycling center. The scene was chaos. Hexalon repair teams swarmed over the massive machines, but nothing was working. The systems were too complex, too interconnected. When one part failed, it affected everything else. "How long do we have?" Thomas asked a Hexalon engineer. 18 hours of reserve oxygen, the engineer said, his voice shaking. "Maybe less." Thomas found Rebecca and gathered every human worker he could find. 20 people in total. He explained his plan quickly. "The main system is too damaged to fix in time," Thomas said. "But there are backup systems in the maintenance tunnels. The Hexalons can't fit through those tunnels. They're too big. But we can." "Those tunnels were built for repair drones," Rebecca said. "They are barely 3 feet wide." "I know," Thomas said. "But we are the only ones small enough to get through. And we can carry tools with our hands while we crawl. The Hexalons need all their limbs just to walk." For the next 16 hours, the human workers crawled through narrow tunnels that wound through the station like veins through a body. The spaces were hot and cramped and dark. Thomas led teams through passages that had not been used in decades. They dragged tools and equipment behind them, squeezing through gaps that seemed impossibly small. Rebecca coordinated the teams by radio, her voice calm and steady even though Thomas knew she must be terrified. They bypassed broken systems and reconnected old backup units that the Hexalons had forgotten existed. The work was exhausting. Thomas felt like his arms would fall off. His knees were bloody from crawling on metal grates. But he kept moving. With 2 hours of oxygen remaining, the backup systems hummed to life. Fresh air began flowing through the station again. Thomas crawled out of the maintenance tunnel, covered in grease and blood and sweat. The central operations room was packed with aliens of every species, all watching the oxygen meters climb back to normal levels. Krellick stood in the center of the room. His 6 legs trembled slightly. He walked over to Thomas, who was too tired to even stand up straight. "Your design," Krellick said quietly. "The one I rejected. Do you still have the plans?" Thomas nodded slowly. "We will implement it immediately," Krellick said. "And we will need you to review all of our other systems. Perhaps there are more improvements to be made." "Perhaps," Thomas said, too exhausted to smile. Word spread quickly through the station. The bipeds had saved everyone. The bipeds had gone where no other species could go. The bipeds had done what everyone said was impossible. In the cafeteria that night, a Hexalon worker approached Thomas nervously. "Thank you," the alien said in broken human language. "You saved my children. They live on this station." Thomas shook the creature's claw gently. "We all take care of each other. That is what civilization means." But deep in his mind, Thomas thought about all the council stations, all the ships, all the systems designed by species who could not imagine a different way of doing things. If humans could improve one station, they could improve them all. The other species were starting to notice. And some of them were starting to wonder if maybe the bipeds were not as primitive as everyone believed. Dr. Margaret Foster pressed the button and watched her research paper upload to the Galactic Network. She had spent 4 months writing it, checking every fact 3 times, making sure every word was perfect. The title glowed on her screen in simple letters that would change everything. The Efficiency Paradox: Why Bipedal Locomotion Represents Advanced Neural Evolution. Margaret sat back in her chair and waited. She did not have to wait long. Within 6 hours, her paper had been downloaded 8 million times. Within 12 hours, the Council's scientific forums were on fire with debate. Angry messages flooded her inbox. How dare a Tier 7 biped challenge thousands of years of accepted biological science? But Margaret had the evidence, and evidence did not lie. She had proven that walking on 2 legs required incredible balance. Every single step a human took involved millions of tiny calculations in the brain. Sensors in the feet, the legs, the inner ear, all working together constantly to keep a person upright. Other species with 4 or 6 legs did not need this. They were naturally stable. But humans had evolved brains that could handle this complex task without even thinking about it. More importantly, human hands were free. While other species used some of their limbs for walking, humans used their hands for everything else. Millions of years of evolution had made human hands incredibly precise. A human could thread a needle, perform delicate surgery, or build tiny electronic components. Most alien species needed computer assistance or cybernetic enhancements to match what humans could do naturally with their fingers. And then there was endurance. Margaret had compared the stamina of every species in the Council. The results were shocking. Most aliens could run faster than humans in short sprints. But humans could keep going for hours. Days even. Human bodies were designed for persistence, for never giving up, for outlasting any challenge through sheer determination. "We are not primitive," Margaret said in a video she recorded for the Galactic Networks. "We are specialized. Our bodies represent a different solution to the problem of survival. Different does not mean worse. It just means different." The Council's military leaders watched her video with great interest. General Robert Clark received a message 3 days after Margaret's paper went viral. It came from the Council's supreme military commander, a 4-legged creature named Voth who had fought in 100 battles. "We need to speak about the war," Voth's message said. Robert traveled to the military headquarters on the Council's capital world. Voth met him in a private office, and for the first time, Robert saw fear in an alien's eyes. "The Void Collective has defeated us 3 times, Voth said quietly. "They use tactics we do not understand. They attack from terrain we consider impassable. Our soldiers are brave, but they are not winning. We need something different. We need your humans." "You want us to fight your war?" Robert asked carefully. "I want you to show us how to win it," Voth replied. 2 months later, Captain David Morgan led his company of 200 human marines onto the surface of Kellis 9. The planet was a nightmare of steep mountains, deep valleys, and rocky terrain that cut feet and broke equipment. The Council had already lost 5,000 soldiers trying to hold this world. "Command says the Void Collective will attack through the northern pass," said Lieutenant Rachel Webb, checking her equipment. "But they also said this terrain was impassable. Clearly they were wrong about that." David smiled grimly. "Then we will show them what humans can pass through." For 3 days the human Marines moved through the mountains. They climbed slopes that made their legs burn and their lungs scream for air. They crossed ravines on narrow ledges that would have terrified most species. They carried their weapons and equipment on their backs, using their hands to grip rocks and pull themselves upward. Other council soldiers watched in amazement. Quellan troops, who walked on 6 legs and were considered excellent climbers, gave up after 6 hours and had to be airlifted out. The humans just kept moving. "Do they not get tired?" asked a Quellan officer watching the human Marines march past his resting troops. "Oh, they are tired," replied a human medic named Peter Grant. "They are exhausted. They just do not stop." On the 4th day the Void Collective attacked. They came through the mountains exactly as David had predicted, using paths that council strategists had marked as impossible. But the humans were already there, waiting in positions that other species could never have reached. The battle lasted 30 hours. It was brutal and chaotic. The Void Collective were excellent warriors, adapted to harsh environments with thick armor and powerful weapons. But they had never fought an enemy like humans before. Human soldiers fired their weapons while running across broken ground. Other species needed to stop and brace themselves to shoot accurately. Humans had evolved to throw spears while chasing prey, so their brains could naturally calculate movement and adjust their aim. Every human soldier could hit targets while moving at full speed. When the Void Collective tried to engage in close combat, they found that human reflexes were incredibly fast. 2 hands holding a weapon could strike and block and counter faster than most species could follow. Humans had evolved these skills from thousands of years of making tools and hunting prey with their hands. But the most terrifying thing for the Void Collective was that the humans simply would not quit. When Quellan soldiers needed to rotate out after 12 hours of fighting, the humans stayed. When other species needed rest and food and medical care, humans took quick breaks and went back to fighting. They were tired and hurt and hungry, but they kept their positions for 28 straight hours. Finally, for the first time in the war, the Void Collective retreated. David Morgan sat on a rock, his body aching in places he did not know could hurt. Around him, his Marines were finally resting, some already asleep despite the noise and chaos of the battlefield. Voth himself arrived by transport ship to see the impossible victory. He looked at the exhausted human soldiers, then at the mountain terrain they had conquered, then back at David. "Your Dr. Foster was correct," Voth said slowly. "You are not primitive. You are something we have never encountered before. You are persistent." David managed a tired smile. "Welcome to humanity, sir. We do not know how to quit." News of the victory spread through the galaxy like fire. The bipeds, the lowest tier, the species everyone had dismissed, had won a battle that no one else could win. They had done it by being exactly what they were, by using the gifts their evolution had given them. And suddenly, the entire galaxy started to wonder what else they had been wrong about. The galactic networks were buzzing with human innovations. Engineer Helen Price had just released a new design for faster-than-light engines that was 1/10 as complex as the Council's standard models. It worked better and cost less to build. Within weeks, 17 shipping companies had requested permission to use her design. Artist Michael Barnes created virtual reality experiences that made people cry with joy. His art installations appeared on 40 different worlds. Aliens who had never understood human emotion found themselves moved by his work in ways they could not explain. Philosopher Robert Chin published essays about freedom and individual rights that struck a chord across the galaxy. His words spread among the lower-tier species like wildfire. For the first time, beings who had accepted their place at the bottom of society began to question why things had to be that way. The Council was fracturing. "Humanity must be reclassified immediately," argued Council member Thrix, a 6-legged creature who had worked alongside human engineers. "Their contributions to our society are undeniable. Keeping them in Tier 7 is illogical." "They are still bipeds," roared Council member Zolak, pounding his 4 massive legs on the floor. "Biology does not change. They walk on 2 legs. That makes them Tier 7. This is how it has always been." "But look at what they have accomplished," Thrix insisted. "They have redesigned our infrastructure, won our battles, inspired our people. How can we still call them inferior?" The arguments went on for months. Progressive Council members pushed for change. Conservative members refused to budge. Meanwhile, humanity continued to spread across the galaxy. Admiral James Miller, promoted from commander after years of distinguished service, watched the debates from his office on Earth. Humanity now had 40 colony worlds. Human workers had positions on 2,000 council stations. 5 lower-tier species had formally requested human assistance in restructuring their societies. James felt proud of what his people had achieved. But he also felt the growing tension. Change was coming and not everyone would welcome it peacefully. Then Fleet Commander Zolthex made his move. Zolthex was a traditional Krathan, a species that walked on 4 powerful legs and had ruled parts of the Council for centuries. He believed deeply in the old ways, in the tier system, in the natural order of things. And he was terrified of what humanity represented. The message appeared on every human colony, every human ship, every human communication device simultaneously. By order of the Galactic Council Military Command, all human-developed military technology must be surrendered immediately. Any human colony or vessel that refuses will be considered in violation of Council law. You have 72 hours to comply. James stared at the message in disbelief. Around him, his staff erupted in angry shouts. "They cannot do this," said Emily Watson, now his chief advisor. "We developed that technology. We bled for it. We saved their lives with it." "They can do whatever they want," James said quietly. "They still see us as Tier 7. They still think they own us." For 3 hours, James sat alone in his office. He thought about all the humans who had worked so hard, who had proven themselves again and again, who had earned respect through their actions. He thought about his granddaughter, now 10 years old, growing up in a galaxy that still considered her inferior because she walked on 2 legs. Then he made his decision. James activated every communication channel available to him. His message would reach every species, every world, every ship in Council space. "My name is Admiral James Miller of Earth. 20 years ago, humanity came to the stars-seeking partnership. We were judged by our biology and placed in the lowest tier. We accepted this judgment. We worked in your stations, cleaned your waste, built your structures. We did this with dignity and without complaint. Then you needed soldiers and we bled in your wars. We died defending worlds that were not our own. We won battles that you said were impossible. We have proven our worth 1,000 times over." James paused, letting his words sink in across the galaxy. "But we will not surrender our sovereignty. We will not give up the technology we developed, the innovations we created, the weapons we designed to protect Council lives. Humanity came to you in peace. We served you in hardship. We fought for you in war. But we will not kneel anymore. We are done being treated as inferior. The tier system is broken and we will not pretend otherwise." The galaxy held its breath. Within 6 hours, 27 species had broadcast their support for humanity. Most were lower-tier worlds, species who had worked alongside humans and learned the truth. The Quellan, who had fought beside human marines, declared that if humanity was expelled from the Council, they would leave too. The Hexalons of Platform 7, who had been saved by Thomas Reed and his team, sent a message of solidarity. But the conservative factions were furious. Zolthex demanded that human colonies be blockaded. Other military commanders began moving their fleets into position. The galaxy teetered on the edge of civil war. Then the sensors detected them. 50 Void collective warships emerged from hyperspace at the galaxy's edge. Then 100 more. Then 1,000. The invasion had begun. Council worlds started burning. The military, divided by political fighting, could not mount an effective defense. In the first week, 50 planets fell. Billions of refugees fled toward the interior worlds. Panic spread faster than the invasion fleet. A priority message reached James from an unexpected source. Krelix, the Hexalon supervisor who had once rejected Thomas's designs, appeared on the screen. But he was not alone. Behind him stood Thrix, Voth, and dozens of other council members, both progressive and conservative. "Admiral Miller," Krelix said, his voice shaking. "We need you. All of you. Every human soldier, every human engineer, every human ship. We need your persistence, your innovation, your refusal to give up. We were wrong to threaten you. We were wrong about many things." James looked at the alien leaders who had once considered humanity inferior. He saw fear in their eyes but also something else. Respect. Understanding. Perhaps even humility. "What are you offering?" James asked. "Everything you demanded," said Thrix. "Complete restructuring of the tier system. Equal representation for all species. Merit-based classification. A true partnership, not a hierarchy. We need you, Admiral, because if we fall, you fall with us. The Void Collective does not care about our politics. They will destroy us all." James looked at Emily, at Robert Clark who had joined the call, at Margaret Foster and all the other humans who had fought so hard to get here. "Send us the coordinates," James said finally. "Humanity stands with the Council. One last time. But when this is over, things change. No more tiers. No more judging species by their biology. We fight together as equals or we do not fight at all." Agreed, Krellick said. The fleets began to move. Human ships joined with Quellan vessels, Hexalin cruisers, Krathan battleships. Old enemies became new allies. And at the center of it all, humanity prepared to show the galaxy one more time what bipeds could do when everything was on the line. The real war was about to begin. The war lasted 1 year, 3 months and 17 days. But to those who fought it, every day felt like a lifetime. Admiral James Miller commanded the combined fleet from the bridge of the carrier Perseverance. Around him worked officers from dozens of species, all following tactics that humans had taught them. Flexibility, adaptation, persistence, never giving up no matter how bad things looked. The Battle of the Nexus Gate became the turning point of the war. The Void Collective had surrounded a critical supply station that fed 30 colony worlds. If it fell, billions would starve. The Council needed to hold that station for 1 week until reinforcements could arrive. Every military analyst said it was impossible. Colonel David Morgan and his Marines said they would do it anyway. For 6 days, human soldiers held their positions against wave after wave of Void Collective attacks. Other species rotated their troops every 12 hours because exhaustion made them combat ineffective. The Hexalins needed rest after 10 hours. The Quellans after 8. Even the mighty Krothans had to pull back after 15 hours of continuous fighting. The humans stayed for 6 days straight. They slept in shifts 30 minutes at a time. They ate while standing at their posts. When ammunition ran low, they fought hand-to-hand with knives and tools. When weapons broke, they used pieces of broken equipment as clubs. They were exhausted, hungry, hurt, and terrified. But they held the line. On the 6th day, Rachel Webb stood on the wall of the station, her uniform torn and bloody, firing her weapon at the enemy below. Beside her, a young Marine named Jack Foster collapsed from exhaustion. Rachel dragged him behind cover, checked that he was still breathing, then went back to fighting. "How are you still standing?" asked a Quellan officer, watching in disbelief. Rachel reloaded her weapon with shaking hands. "Because if I sit down, I might not get back up. And people are counting on me." When the reinforcements finally arrived, every human soldier was still at their post. They had held for 144 hours. The Void Collective retreated, unable to break the human defensive line. Across the galaxy, the story spread. The bipeds had done the impossible again. Meanwhile, engineer Thomas Reed was solving a different problem. The Void Collective ships had shields that could absorb incredible amounts of damage. Council weapons barely scratched them. Scientists had been working on a solution for months, creating designs with hundreds of components and complex systems. Thomas looked at their work and shook his head. Too complicated. Too many parts that could fail. He spent 3 days in his workshop, barely sleeping, surviving on coffee and determination. The quantum disruptor he designed had 23 parts. That was it. Simple, elegant, and it worked perfectly. When the first prototype was tested, it punched through Void Collective shields like they were paper. "How did you do this?" asked a Hexalin scientist, studying the design in amazement. "I stopped trying to be clever," Thomas said. "Sometimes the best solution is the simplest one." Within weeks, every council ship was equipped with Thomas's disruptors. The tide of the war began to turn. Dr. Margaret Foster worked in field hospitals alongside Hexalin doctors, treating wounded soldiers from every species. She shared human medical techniques and learned alien methods in return. Together they developed new treatments that saved thousands of lives. One night, exhausted after a 16-hour surgery, Margaret sat with Krellick in the hospital cafeteria. "I was wrong about your kind," Krellick said quietly. "We all were." Margaret smiled tiredly. "You were not wrong that we are different. You were wrong that different meant inferior." After 15 months of brutal fighting, the Void Collective's command structure finally collapsed. It was not destroyed by overwhelming firepower or superior technology. It collapsed because the combined fleet, using human tactics of persistence and adaptation, simply never stopped coming. Every time the Void Collective thought they had won, the Council fleet regrouped and attacked again. They never gave up. They never surrendered. They never stopped. The war ended not with a massive battle, but with the Void Collective simply running out of the will to keep fighting an enemy that refused to be defeated. 3 months after the last Void ship fled into deep space, the Galactic Council held its final session. The vote was unanimous. The Council would dissolve and be replaced by something new. The Cooperative Assembly was born on Earth in the City of London. Representatives from 300 species gathered in a massive hall built specifically for this occasion. There were no tiers. No hierarchy based on biology. Every species had an equal voice. James Miller stood with Krellick at the opening ceremony. His old supervisor had become a good friend over the years of fighting together. "I never imagined I would see this day," Krellick said, looking around at the diverse crowd. "Neither did I," James admitted. "But we made it happen together." The Quellan diplomat Thrix gave the opening speech. Her 6 legs trembled slightly as she spoke to the assembled galaxy. "For thousands of years we judged worth by appearance. We created a hierarchy based on how many legs a species walked on, how they looked, what their biology was. We were comfortable in this system because it gave us clear categories, simple answers. But then the bipeds arrived. They showed us that our simple answers were wrong." Thrix paused, looking directly at the human delegation. "The bipeds taught us that strength is not about how many limbs you stand on. It is about whether you stand at all when everything demands you kneel. They walked into our galaxy on 2 legs and changed it forever. They showed us that persistence matters more than power. That adaptation matters more than tradition. That respect must be earned through character, not granted by biology." The hall erupted in applause that lasted for 10 minutes. Later that day, Emily Watson stood in a park with her granddaughter. The child, now 12 years old, was playing with friends from a dozen different species. A young Hexalin chased a Quellan child while 2 human kids laughed and joined the game. "Grandma, why did people used to think we were not as good as them?" the girl asked. Emily smiled sadly. "Because we look different. And people are sometimes afraid of things that are different." "That is silly," the girl said. "Yes," Emily agreed. "Yes, it is." Above them, ships from 1,000 worlds filled the sky. Not as conquerors. Not as rulers. As partners. As friends. As equals. James Miller watched the sunset from his office window. He thought about the long journey that had brought humanity here. 20 years traveling through space. Years of working in the lowest jobs. Years of proving themselves again and again. Years of war and sacrifice and struggle. But they had done it. Humanity had not just joined the galaxy. They had changed it. Robert Clark, now retired from the military, visited James that evening. The 2 old friends sat in comfortable silence for a while. "Do you think it will last?" Robert asked. "This new assembly. This equality." James considered the question carefully. "I think it will last because we learned something important. Civilization is not built by the strong dominating the weak. It is built by different people learning to stand together. And now everyone knows that." In orbit above Earth, the combined fleet of the Cooperative Assembly maintained its watch. Human ships flew alongside Hexalin cruisers and Quellan destroyers. Different species, different biologies, different histories. But now, finally, true partners. The bipeds had walked among the stars and reminded the galaxy of a simple truth that had been forgotten for too long. That every being, regardless of how many legs they walked on, deserved respect. That diversity was not a weakness but a strength. That together anything was possible. And in the parks and schools and workplaces across 300 worlds, children of every species played together, learned together, grew together. They would never know the tier system. They would never judge each other by biology alone. They would build a better galaxy than the one their parents had inherited. And it all started because humanity refused to accept that walking on 2 legs made them inferior. They proved their worth not through violence or domination, but through persistence, innovation, and an unshakable belief that every being deserved dignity. The galaxy would never be the same. And that was exactly as it should be.